Today, I'd like to warmly welcome all of you to the show. I'm very happy that you're watching this video. Today I have a special guest, and his name is Frank Schubert. Hello, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Thank you, Frank, for being my conversation partner today.
My pleasure.
I'd like to jump straight into this interview because it might get a bit controversial, but at the same time, it's going to be very eye-opening. So, if you don't mind, I'd like you to quickly introduce yourself.
Okay, I originally wanted to become a teacher and studied in Freiburg, pedagogy, some philosophy and anthropology and such things, as well as biology. But then I thought it would be even better to become a Heilerziehungsflieger, that is, someone who supports and lives with people who need assistance.
That's great. I like that.
Thank you.
How did that develop for you? Was it more fulfilling and exciting than what you initially wanted to do?
It was indeed much more fulfilling. As a teacher, you have 30 students in front of you, and you have to take care of all of them at first. I was always glad when they worked in groups, because then I could go from table to table and work with at most 4 students at a time, much nicer than dealing with a big crowd. In my current job, I work with so few clients that you can really build relationships. As a teacher, it was always important to me to show the students the purpose of what they were learning. What's it good for? How does it prepare them for life? That connection to real life. And in my current profession, everything is real life.
That's true, and I'm so glad you chose this path. There aren't many people who can really work with those who need help, people who need more than just a small pat on the shoulder. They need support. They need love. They need a bit more to understand that they are just as human and just as loved. That's wonderful. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. You're also very interested in historical figures. The first internationally celebrated pop star.
Yes, I first read about this person when I was at the Pädagogische Hochschule, University of Education in Freiburg. I had a seminar on anthropology there, and in preparing for it, this person impressed me the most. I also studied biology, and this person is sometimes called the Prince of Evolution. Everyone knows Darwin.
Yes.
But Darwin was often misunderstood. For example, Thomas Henry Huxley, who called himself Darwin's bulldog, claimed it was all about survival of the fittest, that life is merely a struggle. But Darwin didn't only say that life is competition. He also wrote about cooperation. The social Darwinists only saw the competition, that's just one side. And this man, whom Oscar Wilde called the beautiful white Christ, wrote for the magazine 19th Century. It was named so because it was founded in the 19th century. Thomas Henry Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, had published his article there about the survival of the strongest. And this man said, I have a lot to clarify. There is also cooperation. He was encouraged by 2 people. One was the editor of the magazine. The other was a man Darwin himself thought highly intelligent. Darwin said to him, "This is the true Darwinism. Write it." So he wrote several articles for this magazine, which were later published as a book under the title Mutual Aid. The book was written in English, in exile.
Wow, that's an interesting title. You know, I can't read everything, but of course I know Darwin. There are so many different books about Darwin, and by Darwin. It's like a huge labyrinth you have to enter to really get to the end, but you obviously managed to do that.
To put it simply, many people think Darwin only spoke of competition, but that's what the social Darwinists said, not Darwin himself. In a later book, Darwin wrote about a blind pelican. Other pelicans flew many miles to bring him food. He also wrote about a baboon. A small baboon helped a man in a zoo who was being attacked by a large ape. It screamed and helped the man, otherwise he might have died. That's mutual aid.
Wow, that's sort of exactly what humans should be doing as well. What you're telling me is wonderful and truly impressive. But I think your work also speaks for itself. You have a great YouTube channel.
Oh, thank you.
I absolutely love it. I'm going to share your YouTube channel right now.
Okay.
And you have a video that we'll briefly touch on now. You took the time to talk about the triumphs of white Christ. Yes, you delve into topics, into labyrinths that most people wouldn't even dare to enter.
Thank you.
You do it, and I just love it. I wanted to share your channel. It's called Frank Schubert. I'm going to subscribe right now and become part of your journey.
Wow. Thank you very much.
That's just fantastic. You sit here, talk to people, you're involved, and you're so accessible. It's just wonderful.
Thank you.
Tell everyone a bit more about your channel. It's about you, right? About what you think, your questions, and maybe interviews and such.
The stuff you see on the screen now is from my first interview, and this here is my second. Before that, I made videos about topics that occupied my mind. And the videos we're seeing now, it's all about game theory. I had great success with the White Christ strategy, but no one reported on it. I informed international media, and you are the first to take an interest. Thank you.
Anytime. I mean, these are really profound thoughts and revelations that come from genuine study and intense research. And many people don't want to do that nowadays. So thank you.
Thanks.
Your channel really goes in depth. People have to take the time to open their eyes and ears to it. Do some of your videos have English translations?
Some videos are in English. I think most of the newer ones are in English. And because my English isn't as good as yours, I often use the Speechify app. It generates good pronunciation.
That's totally fine. I think you're doing a great job with your English. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
You said you wanted to ask me a few questions.
Yes.
I'd really like to know what you want to ask me.
I'd like you to imagine that you are this man I often think about. He was very privileged. He was called Prince. He belonged to the high aristocracy, and he was in a way the right hand of the liberator Tsar Alexander II. At that time, the Tsar was probably one of the most powerful people ever. And this man stood by his side as a young adult. He was impressed that the Tsar wanted to free the serfs, several million people, granting them freedom. He thought, that's great, because as a small child, he always had the most fun when he was just with the serfs, when the old aristocrats weren't there. Then they would dance and play and simply have fun. And afterwards, they would clean everything up so that the old nobles wouldn't see what had happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I understand.
He really had the most fun. They all had good hearts. And a peasant woman once asked him and his brother, "Will you be as good as your mother?" She was like your mother. Sadly, she has passed away. His mother died when he was very young. Yet all the serfs always said his mother was very good. And they asked him, "Will you be as good as she was? She had compassion for us." And I think compassion, empathy, that's really important.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
Thank you.
I think back then there were also many conflicts between women's and men's roles. A woman who gave birth to a son was more valued than one who gave birth to a daughter, because the daughter was considered a burden due to dowries. But a son was an advantage, also because of dowries. I think it was a fascinating time for him, living in that era when there were clear definitions of who was who, compared to today, where we often don't know who is who. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, okay.
Back then you had the high aristocracy and the serfs, with nothing in between, really. Today we have something in between, which we call the middle class.
Yes, that's true.
That was indeed remarkable back then.
He was so happy when the Tsar decided to free the serfs. But soon he realized that the high aristocracy pressured this liberator Tsar, Alexander II, still called the Liberator. Under this pressure, the Tsar changed his course, and his liberation plan was reduced to a weaker version. But his wife supported freedom from the start. She had a heart of gold, Maria Alexandrovna. She came from Germany, Marie. But they called her Maria, and you said that women were often less respected. But women often had an important role because some women had a good heart, and she wanted to encourage Alexander II to do good and remain good. But the high aristocracy said, "If the serfs are free, who will work for us?"
Yes, you're absolutely right. And that didn't only happen back then in Alexander II's era. It also happens in our modern times. When Africans were brought into slavery and then freed, there was the exact same struggle. The question was, who's going to do the work?
Yes, exactly, that's true.
They had to do the work themselves then. And that was the conflict. It repeats itself constantly. If you go back to ancient Egypt.
Yes.
And to the Maya and Inca, you find similar situations. They had people working for them. And when those people were freed, there was controversy because they were free. Again, the question, who will do the work now? It keeps happening over and over.
Oh, yes. And that's exactly why I find it so important, because as you say, it didn't just happen once. It happened then, and then again and again and again. It's a recurring theme. And I'd like to ask you, of course, it's easier to put yourself in the victim's position. But please imagine you have the power. You're a privileged man. Of course, you're obviously a woman. But let's say you're a man beside a very powerful man who wants to free oppressed people. They don't have to be serfs. It happens all the time. And there is pressure on him not to do it. What would you do? You have two options. Do nothing. It's okay what you're doing. They're forcing you to weaken it? Fine. Or you could advocate for human rights.
Exactly, I understand you. Okay. Well, whenever slavery or oppression existed, it was never limited to one skin color. There were people, like the Irish, who were oppressed, and they're clearly not black, they're white. There were various levels of oppression, affecting millions or smaller groups. But there's something I always find inhumane. A person should never belong to someone else or be forced to do something against their will. To me, a person is a person, someone like me, who as a human being should have the choice to live a life.
Exactly.
To have children, a family, to be who they want, as long as that's good and doesn't harm anyone, including themselves. Everyone should have the right to live as they choose, and not be forced into a life they don't want, or into doing physical labor they don't desire, just because they're oppressed. Perhaps someone stands over them with a whip or a weapon, you know what I mean? That's one aspect. And I think anyone who stands up for freeing the oppressed will indeed be hunted and pursued negatively. Look at Martin Luther King Jr. and President Kennedy. They were killed because. Why? They were liberators of the oppressed. They knew their lives were at risk. They knew that the path they took to free people, humans, not just whites or blacks, not just Latin Americans or indigenous peoples, not Chinese, Japanese, or whatever. Just people.
People, yes.
They knew that their lives might be the price. They knew their lives would likely end early because someone wouldn't like what they were doing. It would cause controversy, and they would probably die because of it. Think about it. Martin Luther King Jr. was an incredible man, okay? And Malcolm X was incredible in his own way.
I also thought about him, yes.
And President Kennedy, think about it. He wanted to help oppressed people, and what happened? He was murdered. He was a white man. There are many white people, many black people, many people like the young woman who wanted to free her country from the oppression of women, from having to wear a headscarf. These are just various examples, and you must understand, if you are someone who advocates for other people's right to live as they wish, in freedom, then your own life could be on the line.
Oh, yes.
What would I have done? Millions of lives or just one life? For me, the decision would be clear. I would probably have acted like Martin Luther King Jr.
Okay.
Like that young woman who was killed because she didn't want to wear a headscarf. I would probably have chosen like President Kennedy or someone similar if I had to take action. Because on one side are millions of lives, and on the other side, just one life.
Okay.
Would you say you would sacrifice your life if it could save millions of others? Think about it carefully. It's not just about millions of lives. If you have children, it affects their lives too. If you have family and friends who have family and friends themselves, people you care about, or people you look after like you do, all of whom would be affected by your decision, how would you decide? Millions of lives or just your one?
Yes, I know what you mean. But many people would think, I have a family. They would be in danger if I stand up for human rights. My family, my children. He had no children at that time.
Well, Martin Luther King Jr. didn't have children at that time either. But you really have to understand, to do something like that, you have to make a clean break and give up everything. You have to give up your life. Understand? You have to give up everything. It's not like, I'll do this and still have my family. That's not possible. If you stand up for human rights, you must make a total sacrifice. You have to separate from your family. You have to sacrifice that relationship and hide it entirely from the public. They must not be identified. They'd have to change their names. They'd have to move. You can't have any connection to them. That's why I say it's about millions of lives.
Okay,
Or just one life. Yours. That's it. Not your family. You can't have a relationship with your family if you take this path.
that's a good solution. Keep them anonymous.
Yes, keep them anonymous and ensure their safety. If you want to take this path, that's what you have to do. And that's your sacrifice. In the end, you might die alone. But still, if that's your mission, if that's what you want to do, you have to think of the millions of lives. And your family is part of those millions.
Okay,
Or else it's just your life, only one life. Not your family, not your children, your wife, husband, mother, father, whatever. Just your own life, that's all. You're alone.
okay. I really believe you would act that way because you sounded so convincing. And you're a big fan of Martin Luther King Jr. I also have great respect for him.
Yes, everyone should be able to live their life as they want. I'm not anyone's judge, but I definitely think people should have a life, no matter what that life looks like, as long as they're not evil. In that case, of course, their freedom should be restricted. They shouldn't harm themselves or others. But if they want to live a life, have a family, a job, or a business, just let them live.
Okay. And my second question, this man, he stood up for human rights and was imprisoned. But with the help of friends, he managed to escape without violence, just with clever tricks. He fled into exile. And then, after a few years, a new regime was in power in Russia, and he could return. 60,000 people greeted him at the train station. 60,000, that's a lot.
Yes.
But soon he realized that the new regime, they always talked about freedom, but where was the freedom now? And they said to him, "You can become Minister of Education." That would again have been a privileged life. He could have said, "Now I'm a minister. I don't have to work too hard and I have everything I need." Or he could once again stand up for human rights. And my question, I think since you said the first time that you would stand up for human rights, I believe you would do so again this time.
Yes. Why do you ask at all? Of course I would do it again. If I did it the first time, went into exile, and now came back, do you really think I would change my mind? I'm right back where I started. And I still believe in what I stand for. I always do what I must for the people. I'm not selfish. Absolutely, I would do it again. No change of opinion.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, thank you, Frank, for being on the show. I truly appreciate it. And the questions were so impressive.
Thank you. Your responses were also very impressive. And of course, your opinion, thumbs up.
Thank you. That's how you live. You live by your own rules and principles and stick to them. Thank you, Frank. You can be found on YouTube. Your channel is Frank Schubert, and I already like it. I love the name that appears here, DJ Mo.
Yes.
And he has only 61 subscribers so far. So let's get that to over 100 subscribers. You know what to do. Just check out his videos. I'm sure you'll be impressed by the sheer, how should I say it? When Frank speaks, he really talks about things he has studied thoroughly. It's not something that just pops into his head or that he thinks about superficially. No, he's fully immersed in the subject, and I want you to be part of it too. So please subscribe to his channel today. Thanks again for being here, Frank. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so happy.
Oh, thank you. And thank you all for joining us. See you next time, guys. Ciao.
Ciao.